All right. I see people are joining on as we speak. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to AFCOM Southern California Chapter's third quarter 2024 educational series webinar. Before we get started today, again, I know we're not even a minute into this thing, but before we get started, I wanted to make sure that we're taking the time to address who we are as a chapter. AFCOM, which is originally the acronym for Association for Computer Operations Managers. It's the professional association for data center operators really across the United States. We're lucky enough to have Alicia Shep on with us from the national organization, but I also do want to take the time to introduce our board. And the way that we are set up here in Southern California, obviously we're really the second largest metropolitan area in the country behind New York City. But if you were to take literally our San Diego market, Orange County market, LA market, add in Santa Barbara all the way out to the Arizona border, we've got about 25 million in population. And so we are a very large footprint. As a result, we like to try and kind of have our board kind of centered as far as members in different markets. So for instance, right now up in Los Angeles, we've got 4 members. And so I like to kind of have Di, maybe you kind of take 30 seconds to introduce yourself.
Sure. Diane Krabiel-Delson, owner of DKKD Staffing, and I'm located in Westlake Village, California, but I staff all over the United States. I've been staffing in data centers, which is why Jason reached out to me years ago. I've been on the board for AFCOM for several years. My niche is executives, IT, security, human resources, and admins. And what's really hot right now is obviously security and AI on systems and networks.
Great, thanks, Di. As far as our 3 other board members from LA, David Sipes, who I've been on the board for 10 years now. David and I have been on the board the same amount of time. David is one of our voices on the education side. He's actually taking his son to college as we speak, and I'm a little disappointed in him. He may not have his priorities in order. I'm kidding. So David's not here today. Yeet is actually traveling internationally, and Todd Sword's one of our newest members. I haven't seen him join on yet. Dan is San Diego. Brad, why don't you introduce yourself and your organization?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Brad Schulteis here with LDP Associates. We're the manufacturer's rep for Schneider Electric. I've been based out of the San Diego market for 25 years, really supporting APC, Schneider Electric, and local customers in the area for general data center server room needs.
And then Todd, the perfect time, you just joined on as we speak. And so I'd like to introduce our 2 newest board members, Todd Sword and Thomas Tate. Todd, why don't you give you a 30-second introduction on yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Jason, so much. And thanks for everybody for allowing me to join the AFCOM board. Todd Sword, Southern California Edison. I work in our Economic Development Services group, and I also specialize as a subject matter expert for data centers, thanks to educational series like this. So we help site data centers get fiber permits, all kinds of good stuff to help them stay here and grow strong.
Thanks, Todd. Thomas, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Tom Tate. I'm the data center manager of the San Diego Supercomputer Center. I've been in the industry for about 15 years now. I'm happy to be a member of the board.
Thank you. And then, so I'm Jason Shepard. I'm the president of our chapter. I've been on the board for about 10 years now. My day job, I'm the managing principal of Cressa's data center practice. Cressa is the largest tenant rep commercial real estate services firm in the country. I specialize in representing clients in the acquisition and disposition of data center space. In fact, we currently have on the market the former AT&T data center facility in San Diego on the market for sale. If anybody's interested, you can message me about that. What I'd like to do is also turn it over to, let's talk about the agenda first. So the agenda for today's call is, obviously, we just did the board introductions. And by the way, I do want to thank our board because for everyone's reference, this is a volunteer-based organization. And so without the thought leadership of our board members, we wouldn't be anywhere. So thank you to all of you. Also, it's important to note that we do record all of these webinars. They are uploaded to our YouTube channel. So if you just go onto YouTube and search hashtag AFCOM, hashtag AFCOM Southern California chapter, or just AFCOM Southern California chapter, you'll see all of our recordings over the past few years. In fact, since COVID, we've shifted primarily to online webinars. It is also important to note that last fall, third quarter of last year, our webinar was on AI's impact on the data center specifically. And so Yeet Balut from our team on our board, who heads up EYP Mission Critical Facilities, California office, he did a session specifically on the technical components of AI. So for instance, a traditional corporate user might use 3 to 5 kilowatts of power per rack. You look at the hyperscalers using over 20 kilowatts of power per rack. Some of these AI requirements are 30 to 60 kilowatts of power per rack. You can't necessarily just compare apples to apples here, because they're completely two different animals when it comes to the amount of infrastructure that's needed. So what I'd like to do next is turn it over to Alicia from our national organization to talk a little bit about AFCOM.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to the board, because as Jason mentioned, you all are volunteers in this, and really all of our volunteers for all of our chapters across the country are the folks that are driving AFCOM's mission to our local communities. So as Jason mentioned, AFCOM started as the Association for Computer Operators Managers in 1980, so we're coming up on our 45th year anniversary. We are the longest standing association in the data center industry, and since that time, we have grown alongside the industry that we have served, evolving to continue to provide vendor-neutral education forum for our members to learn, build professional relationships across the industry, and engage in industry-specific tools, news, and the latest research to support our full career development. A few of our member benefits, if you want to go to the next slide, Jason. We have, again, all of our local chapters, which are really the lifeblood of our organization. New this year, we also have added some training certification discounts for certification programs, such as the Certified Data Center Professional offered by EPI. We have a number of other benefits that are really like this. Our AFCOM webinar, monthly webinar series is very well attended, and we have our AFCOM and Data Center World program chair, Bill Clayman, does a great job with our State of the Data Center report every year, and usually does a webinar of that. We actually sold out that webinar last year, which is kind of amazing. When you have a 500 seat license and you sell out a webinar, it's pretty awesome. So we have a number of different things. You can scan that QR code there to join or to find out more information on all of the different pricing and different structures. We do have corporate group discounts available if you have a team of 3 or more that you want to register to save a couple bucks as well. And then coming up soon, it's really hard to believe because I feel like we were just there yesterday, but at Data Center World, if you want to go to the next slide, Jason, is coming up again in April 2025. We will be back in Washington, D.C. Last year, we actually welcomed over 2,800 professionals, and Jason was one of those, so he could speak more to it as well. But our call for proposals opened yesterday. So if you have an engaging story that you'd like to tell, a case study, best practices, something that you'd like to share in a vendor neutral setting, there's more information if you go to datacenterworld.com. I believe across the top there's a thing that says call for proposals is open, and I can actually see if I can drop it in the chat here as well, or send it over to Jason to share. So that's something to note. Registration will open in October. So if you're not a member, that's the best rate that you're going to be able to get for membership, member discounts for AFCOM member pricing. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jason.
Great, thanks, Alicia, and you do a fantastic job on the national stuff, and I appreciate all your efforts, what you do for our chapter as well.
Amazing, thank you so much.
So a few things, because I want to get right to our guest speaker today, but just want to kind of share a few things. So we track all obviously the headlines that are going through the different industry periodicals, but it's really when it hits the Wall Street Journal, you start getting calls from people in your own company saying, "Hey, what's going on with this whole AI thing? What's going on with the power industry? These are literally just articles. If you kind of go down below the table, you'll see that the Wall Street Journal had an article last week on AI. Is that going to be boosting power bills? And on top of their article on AI from their May issue. And then obviously Data Center Frontier just had an article on the AI arms race. I will tell you, as a commercial real estate broker that specializes in data centers and having been doing this for over 25 years, I've never seen it like this in the marketplace. If I'm going out to at the top of the screen here, you look at PTC, which is Pacific Telecom Council's annual conference in Honolulu every year, and then Data Center World's conference which is in different markets every year. If you look at those two conferences, I go to these conferences every year, and I would say back last year in the 2023 event, the top 4 most reported on topics for the different presentations were: number 1, sustainability and ESG initiatives; number 2 were supply chain issues; 3 was cloud, edge computing, hybrid models, and repatriation. And so we are all on the same page what repatriation is, and this has been a big topic even at Data Center World again this year, is that there are corporate clients who have started to onboard cloud, and then maybe they overbit too much, right? And so they're trying to right size and come back from cloud, the stabilized load, not moving away from cloud, just right sizing, right? And so it's really a hybrid model going forward. So those, and then number 4 was AI, ChatGPT, and virtual reality. Those were the 4 most reported on topics at both Data Center World and PTC last year. This year, the number 1 most reported on topic was telecom infrastructure, whether it's subsea cabling, upgrading infrastructure. ESG wasn't even on the map. Number 2 is the power infrastructure and energy considerations. Again, just an illustration of growing AI. Number 3 was, again, AI, ChatGPT, virtual reality, and then cloud hybrid models slipped down into 4th. But it's just an illustration that right now, AI is on the top of everyone's minds. Again, last year, we did a full session on the impact that AI is having on the data center specifically. This time, we wanted to say, hey, how is it impacting kind of globally from an IT standpoint? And so I'm going to turn over to Brad from our board, who can introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, Jason. Everybody, welcome. I'm really excited about this presentation. I've actually seen Ross present a handful of times. I've worked with Ross on some use case scenarios for general AI. And having had this discussion with Ross on a few occasions, I really learned that most people's understanding of AI is limited to maybe image creation or simple, hey, help me write an email, or things that are kind of on the very surface of it. I learned quite a bit in the last year, having worked with Ross and some other people, and I really feel that we're still in the infancy of what AI is going to offer. I call this, I think I see Ross shaking his head, I think we're in the 1995 days of the internet. And this is going to get bananas in the next 5+ years. And Ross is going to show us probably something new every time you talk to him, because I've seen him present a handful of times and he's always showed something new. So I'll turn this over to Ross, who is our local AI expert and is going to give us an overview of AI use case.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to the entire board for having me here. So yeah, I'll dive right in. Let me share my screen here. Perfect. So let's get into this. There we go. So who am I?
By the way, sorry, Ross. Let me just say one thing for the people who are viewing today. If you do have specific questions, we're going to reserve at least the last 5 minutes for Q&A. If you do have any questions, you can just type them into the chat box down below, and a member from our board will be tracking along.
Excellent. That sounds great. Yeah, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on who I am. I'm essentially the founder of Kiingo AI. We're an AI integrator. We help companies with training and with implementation of AI technology, and I've helped companies with establishing AI strategies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what AI is, how it works, the strengths and the limitations of AI. We'll touch on some applications specifically for data center professionals, for IT professionals, and then, like Jason said, do some questions toward the end as well. So I want to start for maybe those who may not have a lot of experience with ChatGPT or AI. I would think of this as a digital intern. So I call it an intern because it does make mistakes, and we're going to go into that. But if you're curious about how people are using this, well, on the personal side, you can probably imagine students are using this to write their papers and do their homework and research. You can take a picture of a page in a math textbook and say, solve these problems for me, and it will, which is kind of wild. If you've got a trip coming up, you can create a personalized itinerary for you based on the things you like doing, the food you like eating. It'll help you improve a family recipe, make it a little tastier, or put together a workout plan for you based on the amount of time you have to work out in the day. People are using it for chatting, for gaming, a whole bunch of personal applications, right? Now, today, obviously, we're kind of focused on business applications of AI. And when I talk about AI today, I'm going to be mainly focusing on generative AI, which is that thing that's taken off in the last year or so. And it's really, like Jason was mentioning, consuming a lot of power right now. So on the business side, there's obviously marketing and sales, and that's kind of the low-hanging fruit when using this technology. People are using it for creating blog posts, social media posts, advertising content, sales letters, but it goes beyond that. So you can use it for things like analyzing a legal contract, finding if there are loopholes or red flags or discrepancies. I should note real quick that you still do have to send this to your lawyer. AI can make mistakes, but it can help serve as a kind of second set of digital eyes. It also is helpful when it comes to customer support, project management, estimation, bidding, proposals, resume screening, personalized training, onboarding, all these different sorts of applications. But I do like to start typically with just a short demo for some folks who may not be super familiar with this technology. And here's ChatGPT. It's kind of the workhorse of AI right now. It's one of the most popular platforms when we talk about these chat bots. Some other competitors to ChatGPT are things like Claude, which is from the company called Anthropic. And of course, there's Gemini from Google. And these all roughly do the same thing. You can basically talk to them and they'll talk back to you. It's kind of like texting a computer here. And so what I'm going to do, just to demonstrate something real quick, is I'm going to show you how to do the same thing from sort of a beginner perspective, intermediate, and advanced. And we're just going to try to write a blog post for AFCOM here real quick. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, write a blog post for this organization, and I'm just going to put in your website. And it is going to create us a blog post. Now, if you were to read this, you might find that there might be some issues with it. It may not be totally accurate. And one of the reasons for that is this is kind of like when we think about AI as our intern. I just sat down with it and said, write me the blog post, solve my problem. And, maybe our intern here is trying to ask questions and we're saying, nope, no questions, just write the blog post. And when you do that, when you don't provide the AI any context or any background information, it can make mistakes. It can also give you kind of generic, abstract information. And so this is sort of the beginner way of using AI. It's where you just ask a question and expect an answer back. Or you say, solve my problem, and then you wait for the final answer immediately. Now, there's another way to approach AI where it can be a little bit more valuable. And that's like continuing this with this metaphor. If we were to sit down with our digital intern and say, hey, let's go over this task a little bit. So here's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to go to Perplexity, which is an AI first search engine, another tool kind of similar to ChatGPT, but it has native access to the internet. And I'm going to say, research this organization. And let's see what we get back. So this is going to go online. This is going to do some research on AFCOM, and it's going to pull out relevant information and give me back a single answer instead of giving me back a list of links. Now, you'll notice it's also citing its sources, and any time where we use AI, we really do want to cite the sources or rather check on the sources and make sure that it hasn't made a mistake. But I'm going to go back to ChatGPT. I'm going to provide it a little bit of context. And I'm going to say, just consider the above organization. So what we're doing now is we're establishing context. It's like, again, if we were to sit down with our digital intern and say, let's think about what this organization is and what might be most beneficial to them. So then we could say something like this. What kinds or who would be the target market for the blog posts of this organization. So what we're doing here is, again, we're establishing context. It's like I'm asking leading questions. This is called priming. And what I'm really doing is getting this information into the AI short-term memory. So the target market for blog posts from AFCOM might be IT and data center professionals, industry leaders and executives, technology vendors, service providers, academics and researchers, etc., right? And then I might say something like, what would these groups find most valuable in the blog posts from this organization? So asking a little bit more context to get this information in the AI's short-term memory. And then finally, of course, I could say something like, what would a social media manager include in a blog post to keep the reader engaged? Now, of course, I don't really care directly about the answer to this question, but what I'm doing is I'm getting the information into the AI short-term memory. And what that means is any of this information in what's called the context window or the conversation here, it's going to be used by the AI to give us a final answer. So now I can say something like, using all the above information, give me 10 ideas, and I'll just say give me 5 ideas for blog posts for this organization. And now we're going to get 5 targeted ideas for these target audiences and based on what they're going to find most practical and most valuable. And so what I think you'll see is that this is going to be significantly more beneficial in terms of the blog post here than if we were to just tell the AI, write me a blog post. So this is really a difference in how we approach the technology. Again, kind of anthropomorphizing it here, sitting down and saying, let's explore, let's use it as a tool for clearer thinking. And that's something we'll go over a little bit today. But that's just a quick demo for the folks who maybe haven't used this technology much. And then I'll finally say there's a thing, if we're talking about the advanced approach, a technique called GPTs, which we likely won't have time to get into today, but they're sort of these digital assistants that can help you automate processes throughout your day. And so I can talk to one of my GPTs and give it my special commands, and it will think about what are some of the challenges that AFCOM might have as an organization. And I can use that and use that as context for creating blog posts, for instance. So you know, if we want to go over that in the end, we definitely can, but that's more of an advanced approach to using ChatGPT. But the goal here is just to see that there are different sort of tiers of how you can use this technology, and you can get a little bit of a taste of what's possible when you really start sitting down with it. Now, you might be saying, we don't write blog posts, and that's perfectly fine. All of these techniques of gathering background information, asking leading questions, getting context, that can all be applied for essentially anything. You're writing any proposals, you're brainstorming or problem solving, you can use those same techniques. All right, so let's go back to our slides here. And I want to zoom out for a second and just ask, what is AI? So AI is essentially getting computers or machines to accomplish tasks that normally require human-level intelligence. And like I said, today we're going to be focused on generative AI. So that's things like creating text and reasoning through these chatbots, or audio, music, songs, manipulating, or rather duplicating people's voices, creating videos, creating images, those sorts of things. That's generative AI. But as we go through today, what I want you to think about is, where were we 1 year ago in AI? What was possible? What were you doing with this technology? And where are we now? What's possible? What are some of the things I'm going to show you today? And then think about, where are we going to be in 1 year? Take that rate of progress and project it another year into the future. And what would it look like for your organization not to be using AI? And for maybe your competitors to be using it? That's one of the big questions we want to kind of keep in the back of our minds today. I want to show you a little bit of the progress of generative AI through the months here. This is a sample from an AI generation model called Midjourney, an AI image generation model called Midjourney. And you can see this was state of the art in February 2022 for creating images. Kind of scary, not that great, but at the time it kind of blew people away. And you can see as we progress, this is version 2 of Midjourney, version 3. There's a big bump up to version 4 there. Version 5, And now we're at version 6, actually technically 6.1. And this is like a National Geographic image, right? But you only have to type in a couple of sentences to get this, which truly is amazing. And so this is just to kind of demonstrate to you the rate of progress of this technology. And it's not just occurring in images. It's also occurring in audio, in text, and in video as well. So what I want to do now is go over some of the strengths of AI, some of the areas where it really shines. But before I get into that, the first thing I want to say is that it's tempting for us when we get into ChatGPT to treat it like a search engine. We see that search bar at the bottom and we say, okay, how old is this actor? How big is this butterfly from this country? I want to ask these fact-based questions. But there's a key principle here that these language models like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they are not search engines. They are not good for getting factual knowledge-based information. In fact, the more specific and fact-based of a question you ask, the more that the AI is likely to hallucinate, which we will go into in a second. It is exactly what you think it is. So where should we use this technology if we can't use it for retrieving facts? Well, first of all, search engines are still for facts. They're still great for that, provided you trust the sources. For language models, you want to think of them as tools for clearer thinking. So they help us get our ideas onto paper, help us organize our thoughts, help us explore new directions, brainstorm. They can help us ask questions like, how do we close more deals? Or how do we get our team more engaged? How do we create a security policy for our facility? All these sorts of things. And so that's why one of the key use cases for generative AI and for language models is problem solving and brainstorming. So using something like ChatGPT to help me solve my tactical problems. I've got an error message on my computer. I can take a screenshot, upload that to ChatGPT and say, hey, how can I solve this? What's going on? Or maybe I'm trying to fill a position and I haven't been able to do that in a couple of weeks. So I upload the job description to ChatGPT and say, what am I missing here? How can I improve this job description? Or should I even be posting online? Do I need a job fair? There's also helping you solve strategic issues like I'm concerned about this competitor. Can we do a SWOT analysis on them or a SWOT analysis on the industry in general? Or I'm concerned about our employees. Can we improve their engagement? I'm concerned about this vendor relationship. Is there some way for us to get out of that? And you upload your documentation or your contract to ChatGPT. But real quick, I want to show you something pretty important before you upload your contract to ChatGPT or your 5-year plan or your financials or anything like that. We need to talk a little bit about data privacy and security. All of the information that you upload to ChatGPT down here at the bottom, or you upload a file, that by default is saved by OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, and used to train their future models. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, in the top right-hand corner, you go into settings, then you go into data controls, and they're going to try to guilt trip you into keeping this setting on, but you are not going to fall for it. There's a setting here that says improve the model for everyone. You want to make sure that this is off. And the tricky part here is that they do not, this does not sync across devices. So if you turn this off on your phone, it's still on your laptop. Turn it off on your laptop, it's still on your desktop. So you need to make sure that this is turned off on every single one of your devices. If you deploy this to multiple employees, make sure that it's off on every single one of their devices as well. So that's a little bit of data privacy and security. Just remember that before you upload any proprietary information to ChatGPT. Likewise, if you're using Gemini, you also have to turn that off. So let's look at a couple other use cases. There's summarization, right? You can use this to, again, with your training turned off, upload an email and say, what are the action items here? Or give me a summary of this email. Or if I'm using an AI note taker, provided I'm okay with some of the downsides to that, such as my meetings that are recorded will be discoverable in a legal context, and that I have to seek, obviously, consent from the other party to record. If I have an AI note taker, I can take the results of that transcription, the recording, I can take those words, put them into ChatGPT, and ask ChatGPT to summarize the meeting, but also to write me a follow-up email and to incorporate the details of what we discussed during that meeting. And I found that to be incredibly helpful. You can even put together a GPT, or rather an assistant, that will write in your voice. So I don't know if anyone's tried using ChatGPT to write an email, but it always sounds kind of fluffy and, you know, not in your writing voice. That's a little stale, robotic. You can get it to write in your voice by providing sample emails. You can also use ChatGPT to summarize industry news, blog posts, white papers, studies, anything that you want to take in that has a lot of jargon and simplify it or explain a concept to you. There's also Q&A. This is a pretty great low-hanging fruit here. So you can take your HR policy and your benefits and upload it to a GPT and say, hey, can you answer questions? When people ask questions about this policy, I want you to read the document and answer questions, and it will do that for you. Likewise, you can upload your vendor documentation, your IT documentation, user manuals, customer support manuals, training manuals. Upload those and make them available to your staff to be able to ask and answer questions from your documents and from your reference pages. Another thing you can do is analysis. So again, finding loopholes in contracts. We talked about that. There's also the ability to refer to expert consultations. So experts in a certain field, professionals or consultants. And I talked a little bit about SWOT analysis, but what I want to show you here is that this applies to any profession and any technique. So I can say something like, I'm planning a data center migration, and let's see what it'll do. It'll tell me which professionals I would most want to speak to for this: IT infrastructure architect, project manager with IT specialization, cybersecurity expert, network engineer. And these are some of the techniques, frameworks, and principles that these experts or consultants might use: discovery and assessment phase, migration strategy development using the 5 R's, risk management and contingency planning. And then it'll give me some books that they might reference as part of this process. And so the point I'm trying to make here is just that the world's knowledge of all the consultants and professionals and experts in essentially any field, they're in this black box. And so your key is, how do I ask ChatGPT the right questions to get this information out? How do I ask in the right way? And that is called prompting. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, that's called prompt engineering. Let's start looking at a couple of other use cases. If you're translating content, this tends to be a lot better than Google Translate, for instance. It understands slang and colloquialisms. It can translate quite faithfully. There's also transcription, or imagine that you had an AI on a call and it was tied into your voice over IP system. Let's say we had a sales rep on the phone or a customer service agent on the phone. And as part of this, you had maybe a prospect objecting to the sales rep. Well, you can have an AI listening in on that conversation in real time, with consent, obviously, and then giving suggestions about how you can overcome that objection, or how can you cross-sell in this situation, or upsell, or increase the order size. So you can also take the transcription at the end, feed it into a language model and say, is there a personalized development plan we could develop for this sales agent or for this customer support agent? You can also use it for taking a large amount of unstructured text, such as customer survey information or internal employee surveys, taking that and saying, hey, can you find patterns in here? Tell me where people are frustrated or confused. How do we improve our services? We talked a little bit about data analysis, but I could upload financials or sales information or advertising campaign information, again, with my training turned off. But then I could ask ChatGPT to write some code to do a trend analysis, or to project this information into the future, or identify anomalies in the data. You know, Brad was mentioning in the beginning that this goes a lot beyond just, hey, let me ask you a question and get an email back, or ask you to write a policy on something. It goes into automation as well. So you can use AI as a decision point in your automations. You can say, hey, I want you to classify this credit card transaction, find the right account, and then as part of that, update a record in Salesforce, for instance. So you can tie it into your existing ERP or your CRM or your financial system as well. Now, on the research side, imagine that you had an AI tied into your calendar, and as part of this, it was preparing call notes for you. So it did a little research on a contact or a company that you have a meeting with, and it gives you a bit of background on them, maybe some questions that you might ask to be most insightful, and then it emails that to you before the meeting begins. There's also automation in the sense of having an AI tie into your inbox. Every time a new email comes in, it reads that, it understands the question, it looks into your frequently asked questions or your documentation that's in your sort of AI brain or your database of documentation, and then it can draft a response for you. This technology can do that. The key is in the integration of it, but this is getting into some of those advanced use cases for AI. So I've been going on about all the amazing things that language models can do and that AI can do for you, but I want to start talking a little bit about some of the limitations because it's not all good. There are some downsides here. And one of them is that AI is trained to please. So this means that when I ask a question, it wants to give me an answer, which is good. I mean, we don't want our, virtual assistant saying, hey, I'm not going to do that for you. You basically want to say, great, here's the answer. But what do you think happens when I ask a question that it doesn't know the answer to? Well, you can probably guess, it makes it up. And this is called a hallucination. And here's the problem. It makes this thing up and it passes it off authoritatively and confidently. In fact, it never knows when to say, I don't know, which maybe is not unlike some humans that we know, but this is part of AI, which is a little disappointing. But here's a quick example of this. I want to show you a quick example. There was a lawyer in New York, a trained lawyer of 25 plus years, who was suing a Colombian airline called Avianca. And as part of this lawsuit, he went to ChatGPT and he said, hey, ChatGPT, can you give me a list of cases that I can put in my filing as kind of case law? And ChatGPT said, yeah, no problem. Here's this list of cases. And it gave him that list. There's only one problem with this list. Can anybody guess? I'm sure you can. It's entirely made up. So these are totally fake cases. But I've asked a number of lawyers now, if you look at this, this is picture perfect citation format. It's got a Westlaw format in here. It's got the parties, the dates, the case number, the appellate court, the circuit court, everything you would expect. And that's exactly what the trained lawyer of 25 plus years saw. But, how could we try to find out whether this is true or not? Well, it's really, really hard unless you refer to a search engine, because remember that this is not a fact-based question tool, right? And what the lawyer is asking here is he's asking for facts. He's asking for specifics and knowledge-based questions. This is where you would want to use a search engine and not generative AI. I'll tell you what, though. What if we were to ask ChatGPT, hey, give me some sources. Where did you get this information? Can you guess what it would do? Unfortunately, it would make up its sources and it would give you some URLs to sites that probably didn't exist, or it would give you some references to some books that might not exist, or even worse, the book does exist and you go and look it up and it's there, but this case is not actually in that book. And what if you were to say, hey, tell me a little bit about Shaboon versus Egypt Air? Trying to really catch it in the lie here. Well, guess what? It would tell you about what happened on days 1, 2, and 3 of the case that never happened. It would tell you about the judge and who doesn't exist, basically. So it is the world's best liar, and it's always consistent with its past hallucinations, let's say. So how do we avoid this? Well, one is we use search engines when we want fact-based information, right? We use language models when we're trying to explore, we're trying to use it as a tool for clearer thinking, for brainstorming, for problem solving. Additionally, we can upload reference documents. So when we upload a database of cases and we want the AI to read over that, that can reduce our hallucinations. And we also always use a most powerful model, GPT-4, GPT-4o, or Claude Sonnet 3.5. The most powerful models tend to hallucinate less than those that are a little less powerful. But what should the lawyer have done here? Well, he should have used a search engine, right? Or he could have asked ChatGPT first, but then taken that result, that case, and put it into a search engine and verified that it was in fact correct.
So Ross, quick question for you. So is there a way to, for example, like when you're getting information back, is there a way to like have like any type of strength and percentage of response to say, hey, is this baloney or is this something we can use?
It's a really good question. And I'm going to show you. So in ChatGPT, they don't have any feature like that. There is in Gemini. So if I say, give me a list of lawsuits involving airlines, something like that. Well, one, it'll go online. And that tends to be, Gemini is online. It hallucinates a little bit more than other models, but it is able to access real-time information. Google has this button that's the double check response. And so what this does is it will do a Google search for you and evaluate each of the statements that Google or that Gemini made. And so you can see here, it says this is green. It found supporting information for this. It found supporting information for this. It did not find any relevant content for this. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, but just that it may be wrong. Likewise, with anything that it didn't come back and verify, that could be wrong as well. So Gemini has this. I'll say ChatGPT doesn't have this directly right now, but one of the things you can do when you're working with trying to get fact-based information is you can first ask it to go out over the internet and search for information and then use that in its answers. And that tends to get you a little bit better result. Really good question. So yeah, there's these search engines. You definitely want to make sure that you're using those to verify information. And as we kind of exit this limitation section, I would say for you, for anyone else on your team, make sure that you are verifying the output of AI generated information, especially if you plan to take any action based on it, or you plan to make any mission critical decisions. So be critical and suspicious of the output of AI. So now I want to briefly look at a couple of applications for individuals who are IT professionals here. How might they use language models on a day-to-day basis? And mostly language models, if you're not using them for automation, they're great when it comes to knowledge work. So you can think of there being two forms of using AI or language models in generative AI. One form is co-pilot mode. This is where you have GPT-4, ChatGPT on your screen during the day. You're asking it questions, you're problem solving, you're brainstorming. And then the other is autopilot mode. And this is where you deeply integrate it into your existing software so that it can automate processes for you and take actions on your behalf. So some of these use cases we're going to explore here are really in that co-pilot mode, things that you might ask ChatGPT or use a language model for throughout the day. So in here, we might want to use a language model for problem solving. It's kind of what I was mentioning before, but describe a problem in natural language and the language model can give you some troubleshooting suggestions. Or maybe you have an issue with a ticketing system or analyzing past tickets and proposing solutions, anything like that. Now, again, when you start getting into more fact-based information, you have to verify that, but it typically can help you get unstuck if you are stuck in a particular area. There's obviously document generation, so feeding in language models templates and prompts for different types of documents. Language models are great first draft machines. They can integrate documentation tools like Confluence or SharePoint, and they can assist with populating content or writing new articles. Proofreading and editing, this is huge, obviously. So putting in documentation, putting in code or comments, saying, can you improve the grammar here? Can you make this more readable? Do a style check, be my line editor, essentially. Get rid of technical terminology, remove the jargon from this. This next one is a huge use case, although I would say you should probably understand how to read code to make sure that it's not creating something that you don't want it to run, but language models are particularly good at writing code. So for IT professionals, they can assist in writing new scripts, writing code, reviewing existing code, explaining it, helping to identify bugs or find optimizations in any code that you have. You can also use them for email drafting and scheduling. Now, of course, like I said, if you're using just ChatGPT for standard email drafting, the thing that you'll tend to find is that it sounds a little stuffy, a little robotic, and this is where you would want to get it to write in your voice, and there are different techniques for doing that. There's also, like I mentioned, the ability to upload a contract and say, hey, can you review this? Can you help me prepare for contract negotiations? What might I want to keep in mind? Again, you still do have to send this to your lawyer, but it can help you maybe even come up with some questions to speak to your counsel about. There's financial forecasting and analysis, so uploading a spreadsheet, any spreadsheet in a CSV or Excel format, it can take that in, it can analyze historical information, project that into the future, even write code to create its own models for prediction and categorization in the future. So we've talked a lot about different applications. Let's start to talk about implications here for a second. So the Boston Consulting Group late last year in a pilot program. They found that those who use GPT-4 finished 12.2% more tasks. They finished their tasks 25.1% more quickly, and they produced 40% higher quality results. So you might be sitting here thinking about the cost of maybe deploying this over your organization. Well, really, the ROI question here is having your team finish 12.2% more tasks at 40% higher quality results, is that worth $20 a person per month? And I think you'll tend to find yes, especially among your leadership team. And this is a visualization of this data. So the folks in the blue did not use AI. The folks in the green and the red did. And the x-axis is a measure of quality. So we've got these two very distinct groups here in terms of how they're using AI and the results that they're getting. And the other thing that we're tending to see is that AI is this great equalizer. So it takes folks who are in the bottom half of a particular skill, like communication or understanding a particular knowledge base or something, or a work output, and it's taking that and it's moving them to the upper half, so just above average. And so it's kind of bringing up your weaknesses into a strength when you know how to use AI and use it as a tool where it's a human-machine partnership. So obviously, we're going to start to see a productivity boost across the board with this technology, but the challenge is it doesn't come for free. So you do need some level of upskilling and reskilling with this technology. You have to make sure that your team understands what are hallucinations, how do you guard against them, what are some things you can do to reduce the chances of hallucinations, what is prompt engineering, how do I talk to it so it follows my instructions, how do I talk to it so that it will give me the best outputs? That's all critical in your training for your team. Now, additionally, there's this phrase that you may have heard, AI is not going to replace you, but a person using AI will. And I think that's no better demonstrated than in this visualization here. This is kind of like choosing between, do I want the person who knows Excel and is just a quick study around the computer, or do I want someone who's using a slide rule and an abacus, right? That's our choice going forward when we decide between an AI first person or someone who's shunning the technology. And of course, I want to say this last thing here when it comes to integrating and the adoption of AI. If you treat the adoption of AI as a project, something you do over the next 90 days, and then you'll say, okay, wipe your hands, we did AI, it's done. I guarantee you are not going to get the transformative results. If instead you think of AI and AI adoption as a new category inside of your business of looking for efficiency when it comes to training and automation adoption, that's where you're going to really start to see the transformative results. So I know we have a couple more minutes, and I want to give you a very brief crash course on prompt engineering. So how do you talk to these language models so that you can get the best results? How do you get them to follow your instructions? And the first thing here is that this is going to be, in my opinion, the highest leverage skill going forward for using AI, and therefore maybe one of the highest leverage skills, period. The better the prompts you give, and those prompts are those questions you give to ChatGPT or those instructions, the better those prompts, the better the results you're going to get. And the maybe not so secret here is that in a lot of cases, you just want to talk to it like it's a human. But here's the part where that's a little tricky. When we speak to humans, we make certain assumptions about what they know and what they don't know. And typically, if I'm talking to someone in my field, they have the context of what I'm doing, what projects I've been working on, what our company does, what I do, right? There's this background context that's kind of implicit. With language models, they don't have any of that context. They don't know anything about you or your project or your role. And so you have to convey all that information. And so this is really why when you're talking to your language model, you want to explain, what am I trying to do? How have I done it in the past? What works? What doesn't work? What do I want you to do? Provide all of that context. Avoid the ambiguity, be specific, and remember that this is a back and forth interaction. Just like you're kind of thinking about it as your digital intern, if it gives you a result that you don't like, go back to it and say, hey, this is pretty good, but I would want to change this, cut this out, and you're not considering this path down here. So you can always provide feedback, and just because the AI isn't giving you what you want doesn't mean you can't get there. It really is just like working with a human, and it is an iterative process. Now, if you're sitting there in front of ChatGPT, you're seeing that blank prompt box and you say, I have no idea what to say. I'm going to give you a little bit of a formula here that you can use to talk to ChatGPT to define kind of what you can say. And the first thing you want to define, we'll go over each of these individually, is you want to say, what is the task that I'm trying to accomplish? The context I can provide, what role would be best suited to accomplish this? Are there any constraints around this task? And then can I specify a style or a tone and an output? So let's look at each of these. What is my task? In other words, what's my verb? What's the thing that I want the AI to do? Am I getting it to summarize information, help me problem solve or brainstorm, analyze? I can tell it explicitly what's my verb. Beyond that, I kind of showed you earlier that if I'm doing, if I have a business problem, maybe I want to say, is a McKinsey consultant best to solve this problem? Or I'm analyzing financials. Would a financial analyst be best to look at this? So what is the role that is the best to solve this problem? And a quick word of caution here, make sure you choose the right role, or else you can actually get worse results if you choose the wrong role. You're trying to do a legal contract analysis and you tell the AI that it's a blog post writer, you're not going to get very good results, right? So important that you define the correct role. Then the constraints, how should this task be performed? Do you want it in a way where there's no jargon in the output? It's within a certain length of words. It includes emojis, etc. For the style, do you want it done in a conversational tone or being persuasive or to mimic a certain brand voice or to be suspenseful? It can do any of those things. You can even just say, hey, make this more likely to convert or make people more likely to keep reading, for instance. When we talk about an output format, most of the time we think, great, we can have it write in text, but there's a lot of other options here. We can say, give me a table for this, or do a mind map, or give me a press release, or a research study. It can do any of those things and put them into any known formats for us. So some last minute kind of techniques when you're doing prompt engineering here. You can ask questions like, why were you wrong? Or is this the best you can do? What improvements would you make? Is there anything wrong with your answer? Why or why not? Or the one I like to call the disappointed dad, I know you can do better. And when you say these things, the AI will actually redo its answers and it will tend to give you better results. You can also say things like, let's think through this process step by step, or let's think from first principles. And believe it or not, this is kind of weird, but you can tell your AI to take a deep breath and it will tend to think a little bit better through its process. Finally, as I mentioned, you can ask it to put on a role, ask it what kinds of frameworks or techniques or principles this professional might use to solve this problem, and you can tend to get better results that way as well. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information pretty quickly. I know we have a few minutes left. I'm happy to do any more demos for anybody, happy to answer any questions or go over anything else that would be most valuable.
One question I have right off the bat, and I know we started off the discussion on how AI is the new hot topic, right, on everything. And I, being in the data center business for over 25 years, I remember what it was like to go through the dot-com boom, right? And I would almost describe what we're going through right now with the AI boom as almost the same level of fever, right, in the industry. But there are legs behind this, right? And it really seems like today that every different entity, whether it's a database online software as a service provider, right? If everyone's seeming to come out with their own AI application. Do you have any recommendations on how IT teams or executive teams approach these communications with these different AI vendors?
Yeah, so when I'm but do you mean the organizations that are adopting AI or the vendors that are kind of creating the software?
I guess we went through a whole instruction on the prompt engineering, and I think one of the things that Brad had mentioned to me after his first discussion with you, which was it's almost like the selective ignorance, right? That AI doesn't really understand that. It's going to go chase down this whole series of things. And what we've learned today is that sometimes it's going to come back to you with like these results, which might be completely false.
It's possible. Yeah.
And so how do executives navigate these models, at least at the early stages?
Absolutely. Okay. So I work with companies all the time implementing this technology and training them and such. And there are broadly kind of two paths when it comes to integrating AI. Like I mentioned, there's that co-pilot path and that autopilot path. And the co-pilot path is training. So there are things that you can do to reduce your chances of getting hallucinations. And this is why it's so critical for organizations to train their staff on what hallucinations are and how you can guard against them. And then on the other path, there is integrating AI into your software. Sometimes that means using off-the-shelf software. Sometimes that means developing your own software. So obviously, almost every organization, especially with AI, they are hyper concerned with data privacy and security. Sometimes they want to implement their own virtual private cloud and their own kind of their own network, essentially. Sometimes they're just fine having together an AI use policy so that they can define which tools they're going to use, whether their data is shared with those tools. So from an IT professional perspective, you obviously need to be cognizant of the data privacy and security. If any tools that you're using, make sure that you understand what the policy is of that tool, how they are trying to use your data, because I guarantee that they're at least trying. So see if there's some way to turn that off or to guarantee that they're not using your data if that's what the organization wants. Find out where that data is hosted. Obviously, all cybersecurity measures are still in place here. And then as part of that, you also typically want to encourage the organization to have an AI use policy. And then finally, like you were talking about with those hallucinations, make sure that the team is trained on how you can reduce hallucinations, some of the steps that they can take to do that, and then finding their own use cases as an organization so that they can find where to be most efficient with this technology. Because exactly like you said, there are downsides. There's data privacy, there's data security, there's hallucinations, but there are a lot of upsides when you mitigate the downsides and the risks. And so it really is a balance where you want to make sure that you're addressing both.
At PTC this year, they had entire breakout sessions from attorneys on a lot of the different regulations that are coming down from AI, not only in the United States, but also state by state across the United States, and then also international. Are there any top of mind AI regulations that you're aware of that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, there's one in California that's in the assembly right now, and I know it's gone through a few different revisions. It could slow down the development pretty significantly, and particularly it could hurt open source AI development, those outside of some of the big labs. So it hasn't passed. It's still in development, but that's something that I think people should be watching out for. And I unfortunately don't remember the bill off the top of my head, but a simple search should bring it up for you.
We have a question from Walter. It says, where does AI pull the info that it uses in hallucinations? For example, if you ask it about the fake case studies that were cited, where does it get those details that it's lying about?
Yeah, okay, really good question. So unfortunately, we don't have time to go into all of the technicals of how the language models work, but I'll tell you this, whether this makes you feel better or not. The way that these language models work is they're just predicting the next word. And so they don't actually know things in the same way that you or I know things. They don't know that this case exists or it doesn't exist. They instead have in their brain a mapping of the probabilities of which words follow which other words. So how is it coming up with these hallucinations? Well, it's accidentally predicting the wrong word. And once it accidentally predicts the wrong word, the most likely next word is also something that's wrong. And so it kind of swerves off track, and then it continues the right path, but it's on the wrong track. And so that's kind of how these hallucinations work. There are various things you can do to reduce them, but there's no full solution yet. The AI labs are definitely working on it.
Thank you very much, Brad. I kind of hijacked you on that one. Did you have a question?
Me, no, but I will say from a personal case, I worked on training a GPT for, let's just say hardware data that I don't have to go look up, say the weight of a specific battery cabinet. I could train my GPT to almost act as a database. what I found in the results, now this is a very preliminary training of a GPT on ChatGPT. It was providing data that was wrong, but so damn close that if you didn't know to check it, it could get you in major trouble.
Yep.
So a battery cabinet that might be 2,000 pounds, it might have come back with 1,850. Well, that could be a big problem when it comes to construction on multiple floors, right? So I'm working through, and Ross was actually helping me to understand how can I use this data for my specific business to completely mitigate all potential hallucinations. And this goes right back to the fact that this is still the infancy of AI.
Well, look,
Absolutely.
I would like to continue to talk about this for hours and hours and hours, and it is Thursday for us, and so I have a do-over glass of wine this evening, have more discussion about it. But at the end of the day, we've reached the end of our hour. So Ross, thank you so much for your time. This has been fabulous. I would love to get to the next stage of these discussions with you on, hey, what impact is this having actually on the IT operations side of the business? But at least it's a really good start for all of us. So really appreciate your time. Thanks to everybody for participating. Again, this session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. You're free to go on and listen to all of our former presentations for other expert speakers. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you, Ross.
one
That was
last thing.
great.
Keep watching us on LinkedIn for we're planning to have a holiday social. First week or two of December, we're scouting out locations right now, so keep our eye on social media. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jason.